The folding chairs were soaked with November drizzle, but no one moved. Rows of stiff backs, dress blues, and empty stares faced a closed casket draped in a flag. No eulogies, no rifles, just a bugle recorded on someone's phone. At the edge of the crowd, the old German shepherd lay still, muzzle graying, eyes fixed on the box they were lowering. No one called his name. No one spoke to him, until a barefoot boy in a rain-soaked hoodie stepped out from behind the trees, raised a trembling hand to his temple, and whispered, "Permission to stand with you, soldier?" Rain tapped like slow fingers against the metal roof of the old First Baptist Cemetery shelter. A lean man in a wrinkled sheriff's jacket stood just beyond it, his hat collecting water. Sheriff Lou Garrison had known Sergeant Richard "Rick" Daley well. Not since the man came back from his third tour quieter than when he'd left. Still, he came to the funeral because no one else seemed to, except the dog. That damn dog had shown up before even the hearse arrived, lying beside the freshly dug grave like he knew what it meant. They said his name was Trooper. Retired K-9, honorable discharge, 10 confirmed lives saved in his prime. Now he was arthritic and silent, watching the casket like it held his own soul. The ceremony, if you could call it that, was over in under 20 minutes. The crowd, a mix of veterans, local deputies, and 3 town officials who looked ready to leave the second the photos were taken, dispersed like morning mist. No one said a word to the dog. No one offered him food. No one stayed behind, except the boy. Garrison didn't see him until he moved. 1 minute the woods were empty. The next, a soaked, skinny figure stepped from the pines. About 13, maybe 15 if you counted the hard life painted into his face. Jeans too short, face too pale, and eyes that didn't dart. They studied, assessed. The sheriff shifted. The boy was walking straight toward the dog. Trooper raised his head. The boy stopped 3 feet from him and saluted. "Permission to sit, sir?" Trooper didn't growl, didn't blink, just wagged his tail, slow, a tired rhythm. The boy sat down beside him, folding his legs carefully, cross-legged in the wet grass like he'd done this before, like this was protocol. Garrison waited, unsure whether to intervene. He watched them for a full minute. The boy never looked up at the sheriff, but when he spoke, it was loud enough to carry. He ever leave his post? Garrison blinked. Not since he showed up. The boy nodded like he expected that. "My dad used to say some dogs stay with their person even after the last breath. Duty doesn't end, it just changes shape. What's your name, son?" The boy looked up now, and the sheriff saw just how sunken those eyes were. "Wes! Wes Daley." Sheriff Garrison's heart skipped. "Daley? Rick was my father. 6 hours earlier." The gas station clerk on Highway 12 swore the kid hadn't stolen anything. Just stood in the aisle for 15 minutes, staring at a bottle of Gatorade and a bag of beef jerky. "He put him back," she told Deputy Vaughn. But his hands were shaking like a leaf in a storm. Didn't look right. They let it go. Didn't have time for another runaway teen case. At the time, no one thought to ask where he came from or why he had Army dog tags under his shirt. Back to present. The wind picked up. Trooper huddled against the boy's legs. Wes didn't flinch. "Why did anyone bring him inside?" the boy asked. Garrison glanced at the church steps. Tried. He wouldn't go. Wouldn't let anyone near the casket, either. Didn't even bark. Just stood there, guarding it. Wes nodded again, his voice smaller. That was Dad's rule. Last line of defense never leaves until the mission's clear. He reached into his coat, pulled out a torn canvas wallet, opened it. A photo, dog-eared, creased at the corners. A younger Rick Daley in uniform, one arm around a blonde woman, the other around a small boy in Spider-Man pajamas. Between them, a dog sat upright. Trooper, younger, alert, ears pointed high. "That's the only picture I have left," Wes said. "Mom's gone. House, too. You've been on your own?" "Since July." The rain started again, thin, cold needles drifting sideways with the wind. Garrison took a slow breath. "Come on, I'll get you dry. We'll figure things out." But the boy didn't move. "He won't leave. We'll bring him." "You won't have to." He placed a hand gently on Trooper's side, and something strange happened. The old dog sat upright, stiff and slow but proud. He turned toward the casket, took 3 careful steps forward, and sat beside it. Then he lifted his muzzle and howled. Not loud, not savage, just one long, aching note, like the soul of a war song, carried through rain. It made Garrison's chest tighten. It made Wes cry without a sound. And then Trooper laid back down, resting his head against the polished wood, and stopped breathing. That night, the boy refused a shelter. Said the cots made him feel like an orphan. Garrison didn't argue. He let him stay in the department's break room, tucked under a blanket, holding that photo to his chest. Deputy Vaughn said nothing when he passed through, just placed a cup of hot cocoa near the kid's feet and kept walking. At midnight, the sheriff checked on him again. Wes was awake. Why'd he do it? The boy asked. Do what? Wait, that long. Out there. Garrison sat down on the opposite bench. The vending machine buzzed quietly between them. I don't know, he said. Maybe he needed you to see it through. Or maybe he just wanted one person to remember he mattered. The boy wiped his nose on his sleeve. They're going to cremate him? Was the plan. He deserves a headstone. Yeah, he does. 2 days later, a petition went around town, started by the boy, handwritten, misspelled words, smudges from rain, and maybe tears. But it worked. By the end of the week, Trooper was buried next to Rick Daly. Wes was the one who picked the stone. Trooper, served with honor, died on watch. Underneath, small letters in neat, carved script, permission granted. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. Because when they buried the dog, someone else was watching. Someone who shouldn't have been anywhere near a funeral. 3 miles out of town, dusk, a man in a mud-spattered Buick flipped through a yellowed newspaper in the passenger seat. His left eye twitched. His boots were caked in something darker than dirt. Daly's dead, he muttered to no one. In the back seat, something shifted under a wool blanket. He looked at the boy's photo, clipped from a gas station bulletin board. Then at the grave photo he'd taken with a zoom lens. Still loose ends. He tapped the ignition key, but didn't turn it. Instead, he smiled. A sick, slow smile that didn't touch his eyes. Sheriff's office, same time. Wes sat cross-legged on the cot, writing in a notebook the sheriff gave him. He didn't notice the power flicker or the headlights that paused 2 streets away. He didn't know someone had asked about Trooper's handler at the diner. Didn't hear the click of a phone camera in the shadows of the church. Didn't know something was coming. But Trooper had. Even in death, he'd warned them. The wind off the ridge carried a strange scent. Old diesel, wet burlap, and something sharp beneath it. Sheriff Lou Garrison stood alone at Trooper's grave, one hand resting on the fresh mound of dirt. Fog slipped low between the headstones like smoke that didn't rise. He didn't come for closure. He came because his gut wouldn't leave alone. A dead war dog in the rain, a kid who appeared out of nowhere with the same last name. And now, questions. Garrison crouched near the grave, brushing away a note someone had left behind in a plastic sleeve. To my brother in arms. You were always better than the men around you. K. There were no initials on the headstone, no rank for Trooper, no official record of next of kin. Yet here was a note, and a signature that didn't match any member of Daly's unit. The sheriff didn't like mysteries, especially ones that stare back at you like open wounds. 10 hours earlier, sheriff's office. Wes was gone. No sign of forced entry. No broken glass. Just a folded note on the desk next to the vending machine, written in shaky block letters. Thank you for everything, but I need to know the truth. Please don't come after me. Sheriff Garrison cursed under his breath and called it in. Vaughn was already outside, scanning security footage. He left around 3 a.m., Vaughn said, headed east toward the train tracks. On foot, alone. Garrison stared at the screen. The boy's face was pale in the camera's glare, but his jaw was set, like he already knew something he shouldn't. What's east of the tracks? Abandoned lumber mill, 2 miles out, then nothing till Briar Creek. He wouldn't make it that far on foot. The sheriff grabbed his coat. He's not trying to get out. He's trying to get somewhere. Tracks outside town. Wes moved like someone who'd lived in the woods before. Silent, sure-footed, never staying in one place more than a few minutes. The storm had washed away most of the trail, but he followed the memory of his father's stories. North of the tracks, 10 minutes past a mill, there's a shack nobody uses. The place wasn't on any map. That's why Rick used it. That's where he'd taken Wes once, years ago, during a custody weekend. They'd cleaned rifles, lit fire in the stove, and talked about ghosts. That's where Rick had whispered something strange. If I ever go missing, Wes, don't go to the police first. Go here. There's stuff they're not allowed to know. Wes hadn't understood then. He did now. Sheriff's truck, dirt road. By noon, the sky had turned yellow-gray. Garrison kept his eyes on the tree line. No prints, Vaughn said, pointing to the gravel. But tire tracks. Old. Maybe yesterday. You ever hear of anyone visiting the shack? Vaughn shook his head. Garrison killed the engine. The woods were too quiet. The shack. It was barely more than 4 walls and a slanted roof, patched with tarps and barbed wire. Moss crawled up the boards like veins. The door was cracked open. Wes slipped inside, holding his breath. The cot in the corner still had a wool blanket draped over it. A rusted lantern sat on a stool, and taped to the wall, photos, dog tags, a list of names. One was circled in red. K. Moore, Unit 3 to 9. Decommissioned 2011. He scanned the rest of the wall. Next to the list was a diagram. Military base schematics. Access codes. One word scrawled across the top in black Sharpie. Levin. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew this. Someone else had been here recently. The ashes in the stove were warm. Outside the shack. The first sign was a cigarette, but fresh, still smoking. Then came the click. Wes froze. Move your hand, said a voice behind him. Low, controlled, not angry, worse, professional. Wes turned slowly. A man stood at the tree line, holding a sidearm, civilian clothes. But his boots screamed military. His knuckles were scarred, and under the collar of his shirt, just barely visible, a faded tattoo. 3 to 9. You're Rick's son. Wes swallowed. Who are you? The man didn't answer. Instead, he lowered the gun slightly and said, He told you about this place? Wes nodded. Then he was even dumber than I thought. Sheriff's office. 30 minutes later. The call came from dispatch. Sheriff, we got something strange. County database just pinged. Name Wes Daly showed up in a closed inquiry. Federal seal. Redacted details. Garrison stiffened. What inquiry? Doesn't say. Only code listed as Levin. The room went cold. Deputy Vaughn turned. What the hell is Levin? Wasn't it the name of... Garrison raised a hand. Don't say it. Because if it was what he thought it was, they were in over their heads. Back at the shack. Wes stood stiff as the man approached. The gun was now holstered, but he didn't relax. You know what your father was into? The man asked. Wes said nothing. He got pulled into something he couldn't handle. Something none of us could. Project Levin was supposed to be shut down in 2011, but he kept digging. Even after the unit disbanded. Even after we were told to disappear. You're K. Moore. I'm what's left of him. Wes looked down. He told me people would come. People who wanted what he knew. Moore's mouth tightened. Did he leave it with you? I don't know what you're talking about. Moore stared at him for a long time, then walked to the wall, peeled back one of the photos, and behind it, wedged into the boards, was a USB drive taped to a strip of waterproof gauze. He held it up. This is why your father died. Wes stepped back. Then why are you still alive? That stopped Moore. The air between them thickened. Then Wes said quieter, You were his friend. Moore's face cracked, just for a moment. I was, once. Then the sound came. Boots outside. Moore's eyes widened. They're here. 2 black SUVs, roadside. Garrison's truck skidded to a stop as the black vehicles turned off onto the old logging road. Unmarked, clean. Too clean. Vaughn raised his rifle. You think that's federal? I think we're about to find out. They followed, tires chewing gravel. The SUVs didn't slow. The standoff shack clearing. Wes and Moore ducked low as doors slammed and men stepped out. 5 of them. Identical suits. No name tags. No badges. One of them called out, calm and clear. Return the item. Walk away, both of you. Moore crouched behind the rusted stove. They're not supposed to kill the kid. That's the only leverage they've got left. Wes looked at him. You think they'll let us go? Moore didn't answer. He pulled a photo of Wes and Trooper from his pocket, tucked it into the boy's jacket. Your father believed there was still honor somewhere in this mess. And you? I believe in ghosts. Gunfire. The first shot hit the stove. Sparks flew. Moore yanked Wes down, shoved a USB into the boy's pocket, and whispered, Run. Now. Wes hesitated, then took off through the back door as Moore opened fire. The woods, sunset. Wes ran until his legs collapsed under him. He didn't know how far. The gunshots faded behind him. The smell of smoke lingered. He rolled behind a fallen log, heart hammering, body shaking. From his jacket, he pulled a photo and the USB drive. And then, through the trees, he saw it, Sheriff Garrison's truck. And the sheriff himself, crouching in the mud, hands up. 2 men in suits had him at gunpoint. Wes ducked back down, eyes wide. He could run again. Or he reached into his pocket, fingers closing around the sharp edge of Moore's old folding knife. Somewhere behind him, the faint sound of barking. Distant, impossible, but he heard it all the same. Like Trooper was still watching, still waiting for orders. The air smelled like copper and pine sap. Wes lay belly down in the brush, watching the 2 men shove Sheriff Garrison to his knees. The rain had slowed to a mist, and in the fading light, the world felt quiet in that dangerous way, like the second before a mine clicks under your boot. You are now trespassing on a federal investigation, one of the men said. Calm. Practice. Walk away, Sheriff. Lou Garrison didn't move. His hands were muddy, his right knee bleeding through denim. I don't care what branch you claim, he said. You're not official. You got no badges, no names, and I sure as hell don't see a warrant. The second man cocked his pistol and leveled it at Garrison's head. You won't get another warning. Wes clutched the USB in one hand, the folding knife in the other. He didn't even remember opening it, just felt the cold metal against his palm, the shape of a decision forming. He wasn't brave. He wasn't a soldier. But Trooper had stood his ground. And Moore, whatever else he'd been, had bought him a head start with his life. Now the boy had a choice. 10 minutes earlier, at the shack, Moore had fought like hell, fired 6 rounds, wounded one of them before they returned fire. Wes didn't see it happen, but he heard it. Short bursts of gunfire, then nothing, then the silence that follows a body hitting wet earth. He didn't cry. Not yet, but he felt something crack open. A hard shell he didn't know he'd grown. He wasn't running anymore. Now, the woods near the road. Wes moved low, just like Trooper had shown him years ago during a backyard mission. Crawl with your arms first. Keep your chest low. Eyes up. He made it to the ditch, 30 yards from the SUVs. Still out of sight, but not for long. He slid the knife into his back pocket, then took the USB and jammed it into the mud beside the roots of a tree, deep enough that it disappeared under a layer of earth. Then he grabbed a rock and scraped an X into the bark just above it. If they killed him, someone would find it. Hopefully. He stood, walked out onto the road with his hands in the air. Confrontation. The men turned. Sheriff Garrison's face changed from grim to shocked in one breath. Wes, no. The taller agent, slick black gloves, dead eyes, raised his gun. The boy didn't flinch. I have it, Wes said. That stopped everything. The gloved man stepped forward. Where? Let him go first. The man smiled thin. You think this is a negotiation? Wes stared at him. No, but I think I'm the only one left who knows where it is. A long pause. Then, kill the sheriff. Wes screamed. No, I'll take you to it. The gun didn't lower until a sound, low, distant, growing. At first, Wes thought it was the wind. Then he realized tires. Fast. A second later, Deputy Vaughn's cruiser exploded to the tree line like a meteor, sirens off, headlights blazing. The agents scattered, two drawing weapons. But Vaughn was faster. He flung open the door and opened fire, hitting one in the shoulder. The others dove behind the SUVs. Wes bolted toward Garrison. The sheriff shouted, "Get down!" Too late. A hand grabbed Wes from behind, dragging him backward by the collar. Gloved man. Wes twisted, bit down on the man's arm, hard enough to draw blood. The man yelled, dropped him. Wes rolled, kicked out, and scrambled away as Vaughn pinned down two agents with cover fire. One of the agents went down hard, shot in the thigh, his weapon skidding across the asphalt. Sheriff Garrison was up now, hauling Wes to his feet. "Where is it?" he barked. Wes pointed to the tree line. "Under the X." Mud. Garrison didn't hesitate. Ran. Later, in the cruiser, sirens finally returned as backup rolled in. The unmarked SUVs were empty by then. Agents vanished into the woods, leaving behind shell casings, blood, and one dead man in black gloves. Moore's body was recovered by the shack. He'd been shot 3 times. But he was smiling when they found him. 3 days later, town hall. It started with a whisper, then a leak. Someone inside the sheriff's office sent the USB contents to a journalist in Kansas City. Within 24 hours, the story broke. Project Levin, disbanded Black Ops unit linked to unlawful civilian surveillance, unmarked detainment camps, and human testing. Names were redacted, faces blurred. But Rick Daly was mentioned by initials. So was Kay Moore. And one more. An anonymous teen whistleblower connected to a former K-9 officer. Wes stayed quiet. Garrison made sure of it. No press. No spotlight. But people in town knew. They just didn't talk about it. Not out loud. The final service. Outside the church. A week later, they held a new funeral. This one had a headstone. 2, actually. Kay Moore. He knew too much. He stayed anyway. And beside it, Wesley Daly. A space left blank. For later, just in case. No one cried at the service. Except for Wes. He cried because Moore had protected him. Because Rick had warned him. Because Trooper had waited 3 days in the cold for the right person to arrive. And because Sheriff Garrison stood next to him like a wall, silent and unshakable, refusing to let him go alone. Epilogue 1 month later. The boy stood in front of the mirror at the sheriff's house, his hair still wet from a shower. He wore a clean shirt. Not new, but warm. His fingers brushed the collar. Trooper's dog tag now hung from a chain around his neck. Next to it, Rick's. He never took them off. Garrison entered, holding a steaming mug. There's hot chocolate and eggs. They're not great, but they're food. Wes smiled. Just barely. Thanks. School's gonna be weird. Yeah, but I got your back. A long pause. Thank you, Wes said, voice soft. Garrison nodded once. Anytime, soldier. Final scene, Cemetery Ridge. The boy visited every Sunday. He brought a single daisy, Trooper's favorite flower, to eat, and placed it between the 2 headstones. And one day, when the snow began to fall, a girl passing by saw him standing there, hand on the cold marble, eyes shut like he was listening. "What's he doing?" she whispered to her father. The man looked once, then looked away, saluting someone who didn't leave.